Months ago, the press wasn't covering this. I mean, they were covering snippets and there was good Times articles, but they weren't covering it in mainstream. Now you can get a storyline in the press that people are actually reading day to day, in the Post, in the Daily News, whether they like it or not, it's out there. And I think that that's also another strategy and an angle to move workers.
So I think, to respond to my own question, I think undocumented workers is a huge avenue. I mean, when we talk about declining union density, I mean, we're about to win immigration reform in this country, and if we don't really take advantage of this moment to move these workers into some type of worker organization, we will have lost a very important moment. And I think, you know, there's ideas of folks around on what types of organizations we should be moving undocumented folks into after immigration reform. But I'm fully of the belief that if we're not moving them into worker organizations, then we're actually, you know, just moving people into, you know, I think not in a place where they can be effective in terms of leveraging their power and changing this country. So the other thing about, I think, what's happening with, especially with the low-wage organizing work that is happening. You know, I was in Washington, D.C., meeting with a bunch of union folks and academics on this new form of low-wage organizing, especially around fast food work. And someone came up to me, like, you know, a lot of my challenge being in the labor movement has been that I haven't necessarily been able to work with the lowest income people in this country because they're not necessarily a part of our unions. I mean, there's folks like 1199 that represents home health care workers, which are some of the lowest paid workers in this country, but in many of the cases, the union members that are right now enlisted are not necessarily the lowest income people in this country. Fast food workers, retail workers, web workers, etc. And that one, you know, a lot of, you know, like within the unions, you know, it's you know, it's outside of the experience of, you know, folks that have to rely on food stamps, etc. to get by. I mean, in many cases because they've been able to win those fights and win those battles, so that these jobs become higher wage jobs. But that there is still huge segments of the population that are disassociated with the labor movement, you know, including web workers, including other workers in this country where we don't necessarily have a plan on how we're going to reach them, which is why I think a lot of this low-wage organizing work excites me, because, you know, coming from a community organization, I come out of Acorn, where we're in the lowest income neighborhoods in this country talking to folks about issues in their neighborhoods. And, you know, for many of our folks, being able to actually talk to them now about organizing within their workplace and doing these various sorts of fights, which I think in developing this new model of community and labor partnerships is the exciting part for me, because we have huge portions of the population. They're mostly people of color that live in our communities that are not being organized right now. And that this is really an opportunity to change the face of, you know, what unions look like, who they represent, and you know, how many workers, you know, can be involved. So with that being said, I would like to open it up to folks in the room to ask some questions.
The one thing I would just add to, I mean, I do want to tweak a little bit around the fact, I mean, labor organizations are starting to organize low-wage workers in the sector, right? Like, home care workers are the lowest paid, and they are being organized. Airport workers are one of the lowest paid, and they are being organized. And I think the difference here that we just have to kind of figure out is, like, how do we actually make sure that the community organizational model and the labor organizational model actually work hand in hand? Because I think that there's a lot of traditional unions that have done such an amazing job in lifting people, because the union, in my mind, is the only way to go if you want to protect your wages. I mean, I'm just a union girl, that's just the way it works for me. But if we only just figure, if we're only protecting that portion of the workers, and we're not being creative around what's going on in the at the bottom of low-wage worker organizing and the news service, and we don't get ahead of that, then these workers will then plummet, as we all know. So I think that the challenge, and I think it's organizations like 32J and 1199 and RW that are starting to realize, hey, we actually have to organize these workers. We actually have to protect them, because not only is it important to do and the right thing to do, it will protect our workers, our existing workers in the long haul.
So, why don't I start back here since you were...
All right, cool. So,
what's your name and where are you from?
All right, I'm Toy Boy Sheke, and I'm a grad student at Binghamton University.
Right.
All right, so again, I think this is really great. The organizing of low-wage workers is very, very, very important, especially you look at New York City and how New York City is being restructured economically, where you're having even your manufacturers, light manufacturers are not existing anymore, and your top-level management getting richer and richer, and your poor getting poorer and poorer and larger, and your Starbucks, your Walmarts, your restaurants, et cetera, is great. But at the same time, what you also are having is with undocumented workers being actually flooded into the city to actually compete for these, to depress wages further. You're having a whole bunch of people who are being dispossessed and who are not able to be in the workplace. So you are still operating under the assumption that we need to look at people in the workplace. How about those who are outside the workplace, who are unemployed, who are not having jobs? Those are actually the ones who need to be mobilized. At the end of the day, if we start fighting for higher wages, we're just going to fire them and get these ones we're going to work for cheaper. Essentially, in the larger sense, it's kind of, I think, what some of this is. And so my curiosity is, what are y'all doing in terms of actually trying to mobilize those who are not having a JOB, who are in precarious, really, really precarious labor positions where like they can get fired, they're going in and out of the workplace, et cetera, et cetera. That's number two. And number three, kind of like, how far are you willing to go? Because I really think that just fighting for higher wages is good. It's very, very important. But I would like to see kind of this take off and be like more like a, for lack of a better word, like I heard someone said that they're like Occupy on steroids. So like actually people who really, really, really are being dispossessed in the city, actually trying to make serious demands of government and of society to actually change. So not just necessarily fighting for higher wages, but actually going there, these particular segments of the population, not the middle class populations who are doing the poor Occupy generally speaking, trying to really, really make some change. So how far are y'all willing to go and just actually make some serious change in New York City as well as a model for large society, not only looking at what we made work,
Can you just that's a lot.
So, let me actually, I think the two questions I heard within that are especially around how are we engaging folks that aren't necessarily just at the workplace organizing, maybe unemployed folks, other folks outside of the typical organizing workplace campaigns that we're part of. And then the second question is how do we plan to make this bigger and badder, and how far are we willing to take it? So, I don't know how folks want to respond.
I can respond to the second question if you want to talk.
Sure, I can start off. I mean, I think we're here talking about our low-wage worker organizing, particularly about working in workplaces to improve them, right? I mean, we're working much more broadly with all kinds of folks, right, to make demands primarily on government, right, or largely on government, as well as on banks, right, other private landlords, sort of other private entities that screw people over all the time. And so we're doing a lot of work in like economic development to say, hey, we need to create jobs. They need to be for folks who live in these neighborhoods and similar neighborhoods who are unemployed or who have really, are unstably employed. So those are other campaigns we're working on, particularly like a lot in the Sandy context, the Sandy rebuilding. I mean, those are also priorities we deeply believe in, so we're totally on the same page with you. I mean, I would disagree with sort of, I think, what some of your concern about undocumented workers being pulled into displaced people. I mean, I think that what we need to do is enforce workplace rights, right, and get rid of the gray and economy, sort of underground economy where people are exploited, right? But I think that like immigration into New York City has by and large raised wages and increased economic growth, that kind of thing. So what we've got to do is we've got to demand of our government and of the private actors who are rich and powerful, right, that we get our fair share. Like we've got to stop accepting less and accepting the abuse that we get at their hands. So I mean, I think different organizations. You can talk more about like how far we're willing to go. I mean, different organizations are willing to run different risks at different moments and all of that kind of stuff. But we fully believe in the need to build permanent organization and lay the groundwork for moments where mass movement building and mass uprising is possible. Right?
So, yeah, so to the second question, so I love this thing, well, how do we get to the point of Occupy plus steroids? Occupy was steroids. Like, nobody had taken over a park in a long time and created these massive kind of organizing. I mean, the last march I had ever seen that had more than 20,000 people was during the Iraq War, years and years ago. So, I mean, I really do believe that Occupy was on steroids. The question is, how are we actually taking the tools from what Occupy has created, and how are workers like actually looking at that and being more emboldened to actually take on that work? And I actually do believe that the Occupy movement actually sparked workers to actually say, well, if they can do that, then I can do that. And I think that's where you want to be. I don't know if there's ever going to be another Occupy steroids. I'm sure there will be an Occupy moment. But I do believe that there is a moment where workers are becoming more and more aggressive, are willing to take more risks, and it really is, a lot has to do with what the workers are willing to do, right? Is how far can workers say to themselves, well, you know what, this is not getting me where I need to be, so you know what, I'm going to take over my Domino's, I'm going to take over this fast food restaurant or this car wash until people acknowledge me and give me the respect that I deserve. So I think it's that piece, and I think we are obviously willing to go as far as we can go in terms of organizing a large coalition. And as Deb said, there's people that have different ideas of how they want to organize around their campaigns. At United New York, our goal is to try to figure out what's that point of escalation, what is the farthest place we can go at that moment, and then blow it up as far as we can, so that other opportunities open up for organizing strategies.
I mean, and just quickly on your comment, I fully believe that we do have to take it that far, and we do have to take it to that point of the tactics and things that occupying folks were doing, but we actually have to be doing that with workers themselves and engaging them in a real way to be able to take those militant type actions. And I think that's, I mean, for me, what I believe we're also building toward. I don't think we win in fast food organizing until we actually get hundreds and hundreds of fast food workers doing civil disobedience with thousands of other community members. And I want to build toward that. Yep. And I think that's part of what this organizing is doing it differently, not just doing the same tactics over and over and creating a different moment. So let me just, as I saw them from the beginning, right here.
I'll be quick. My name is Talita Sammy from the Community Voices, and I wish I was on that panel because I will be addressing some of his issues about WEP, the Work Experience Program, where people work for their welfare check. Those people need their workers. Those are the lowest paid workers. And we got a bill now in the Assembly, and the Assembly number, we got a bill number to prohibit WEP in New York State. So my question is, how can we work together? And afterwards, I will give you information on the bill, a summary on the bill, to put more transitional jobs in this place, because people with transitional jobs get into the union, and we want to expand those transitional jobs into not only the public sector but the private sector. So we really need to be working together with those two. And my really disappointment is when I'm hearing all people talk about jobs and workers. They're not talking about people who are working for their welfare check, because when it first came out in '96, people was mad and people was doing something about it. And now we have worked with Acorn, we have worked with Make the Road by Walking, but nobody is talking about that now because they done got complacent, and it's the status quo that when you go into a welfare office, this is what you get. But no, it was wrong then and it's wrong now. So we really need to put that in place and work together. So I will give you information afterwards. And do you see yourself with this fight? That's my question.
So totally. I mean, I think that CVH has been doing great work on this issue, and really in a big way. I mean, our membership has decided to shift a little bit away from fighting around the issues of web and welfare stuff, just in recent years, just because of their priorities. But we totally have you guys back. We'd love to be supportive. I think that's it.
I think it'd be good to figure out how it integrates with all the other low-wage organizing work that's happening.
We at the process now of reframing what WEP is and putting it in as workers and workers' rights.
Yep.
Because people, like I said, think WEP is the status quo. Nobody don't care no more. But they still workers. So we trying to reframe it and put it because they are workers.
All right.
Just wondering about the media and communications piece of it. It seems like the work with low-wage workers has really resonated with the press in some ways. And I'm sure it's generating a lot of attention, potentially people signing change.org petitions or whatnot. But I haven't heard any of you talk about the ways in which you would mobilize people that are sympathetic to these efforts, but are not themselves members of low-wage communities that are directly involved in the point of production sort of efforts. And it's sort of interesting because that might be the largest possible group of people that are actually interested in having a connection to that struggle, because you wouldn't be using in-person efforts to work with them. What's happening with that, and where might it be going in the future?
So I can take a stab at your question, so basically we have our coalition that has like NYCC, which is one of the major leaders on the new media front when it comes to worker organizing, have been working towards creating opportunities where people can go and actually connect with workers on the ground via new media. We did this canvas, like I would say maybe 2 years ago, where we generated like 19,000 emails and are trying our best to try to figure out how we actually connect with them. In terms of coalitional organizing, we have a website that's called Workers Rising, where we actually connect a lot of the different campaigns together. We organized a lot of new media campaigns collectively around all the different various campaigns. Fast Food Forward, for example, is a place where I think there's a test at a breeding ground to try to see how we actually connect with workers on an online basis. And we haven't actually perfected that model, right? I mean, workers are not necessarily used to, getting an email saying, "Are you a fast food worker? Would you, sign this petition?" I think we're trying to figure out innovative ways through Facebook and through Twitter to actually engage workers and create kind of spaces for them to be able to talk. But we have done a good job of connecting media to media press to our new media organizing. We have done a really good job of connecting regular people to sign petitions and support workers. I think a lot more has to be done around the worker organizing pieces because they're very fragmented. We have to think about Spanish websites. We have to think about how people don't really have time. Everybody kind of uses their smartphone, right? So how do we actually get them to press a button versus have time to go at night on their computer when they're all day working and washing cars? So there are those different kind of challenges that we face, but we are having some success in petitions that we cultivate. We kind of did a quick pilot where we actually, as the strikes were happening for fast food, we threw out some banners and some new media pieces, and we're actually trying to figure out, if they see it in the press, will they click this banner and will they get involved in the fast food forward campaign? And we actually got some responses around that, right, John? I don't know if you wanted to answer that. But we've been able to do that. The question is, how do we move from the pressing the button of the petition to I'm actually going to go and organize my workplace.
I mean, I think for me on the communications front, one, I think the reason the media has picked up a lot on this low-wage worker stuff is because, we've been pushing workers out there in a much more public way than I think most folks are typically used to. I think folks, even in the beginning of this organizing, were scared on whether we could have an undocumented person talk to the press around a workplace issue. And, it's just people are just out there talking and workers becoming spokespeople, etc. On the social media front, we've done a lot of attempts at things, and I think some have hit and some have not. We've done some pretty good coalitional work, but I'll be honest, I don't think we figured it out or know exactly what we're doing. I think we've figured out a large piece of the actual field work, which many of us come from the field, so that's probably why, but the social media stuff, I think we could be recruiting hundreds of thousands of fast food workers around the country to sign up through online and social media places, but we don't. And I don't know how to do it. If other people want to be helpful, you should let me know.
I feel like to some extent it's just money, right? There's lots of great ideas, and it seems like low-hanging fruit that we're just not grabbing. That's because we don't have the money, right? So we're not able to staff up the different pieces of the different campaigns.
Just to respond to that too, I think, particularly for us organizing in the restaurant industry, I think one advantage that we do have is that everybody eats and everybody eats out, and, at some point, right now I think it's 40% of person's income in the U.S. goes to eating out, right? I mean, it's like a tremendous amount. I mean, like every day, like, right? Like I'm getting coffee somewhere, I'm getting a sandwich, right? So, you know, so I think people can really relate, right? Because this is like their everyday experience of eating out. And so we've actually been embarking on kind of like a multi-phase campaign to not reach workers, right? Because we've been reaching workers, but we're not reaching these, you know, kind of like the general public, right? That eats out, that, and so we've been doing, you know, right now we've just come out with a book about the restaurant industry called Behind the Kitchen Door. So that's also gotten a lot of media attention and, you know, has reached people that have never heard about, right, these issues before. They're like, what? Restaurant workers? They're, you know, they're making poverty wages, right? People are not even thinking about it. And so, you know, we're going with, we also have short films that we've produced that have gone to like film festivals, and then we're also releasing a full feature film on rock coming 2014. So be on the lookout for that. So we really want to kind of reach a wider and wider audience on these issues.
All right, Charles?
I guess I have two questions kind of around traction. And I think that with low wage work, sometimes there's a lot of turnover. And I guess the first question was, how do you guys find traction, you know, in, you know, certain jobs where in 6 months, you know, the person might be gone, or, you know, that company can easily, you know, hire fewer people and possibly cut back hours in a way that you can't necessarily prosecute that. And the second question, kind of talking about bank teller organizing and how it used to be a high paying job and now it's a lower paying job. I live in Long Island, but I feel like I live in a community where there's a lot of people have low wage jobs. And if they have a job like that, sometimes they feel like they're doing well. So how do you find traction with people that think they're doing okay, and not only convince them that they're not doing okay, but convince them that they need to do something? I think with you know, McDonald's, everyone hates it, but you know, there's bank tellers that are making $11 an hour and they think they're doing all right. So how do you find traction, I guess, with both of those?
I mean, I feel like that's sort of like the fundamental thing that our organizers grapple with probably more than anything else. And that's why it's a shame that we're not doing better. I feel like Rock is leading the way on a lot of this, like the driving the public narrative. And we've done pretty well with the, you know, some of the stuff, especially through uni. But it's like all of our expectations for what we're entitled to out of life are so framed by that broader public narrative, right? And so it's like, we've all given up on web workers, right, in some ways, and just like decided it's hopeless to fix that. And like the expectations of bank workers that making, you know, $8, $9, $11 an hour somehow enough, even though Jamie Dimon actually controls the world, right? And could so easily give them a job that's full time with like some basic respect is repulsive. But it's like the raising people's expectations is got to be like the hardest part, I think. And so that's sort of the challenge. We're going out, we're knocking bank workers this afternoon to sort of get our heads in a little bit more too. I mean, the thing about turnover, like car washes actually, I mean, people shift substantially, but we've had people been in the same car wash for 20 years. So I also think that like sometimes the turnover thing is really disruptive. It can be like the broader the scope of your organizing, the easier it is to obviously like adapt and sort of build those long-term relationships. But sometimes there's actually not that much. It's sort of like moments we might expect it.
Yeah, the turnover rate is actually not what people think anymore, right? People can't get another job, so they just stay there. We have fast food workers that have been there for 10, 20 years. So it's actually, there's not a real turnover rate like everybody's thinking about. It used to be that way, I think, when the economy was better. You could jump from one job to another. Oh, I have a crappy job, let me find another job very quickly. That doesn't happen anymore. People can't afford to leave.
Yeah, I mean, I was having a conversation with the RAP, the Retail Action Project. They're organizing Victoria's Secret workers. And, I mean, it's so funny. Like, there really is this belief that, you know, certain jobs are a step up and, like, certain, you know, fast food is really at the bottom. And then, like, retail sector jobs, like, Victoria's Secret, like, you know, working at the Gap or something, you know, you make like $9, $10 an hour. And then you work at a bank and you make $11, $12. Like, there are gradual steps. But in reality, it's like, you're making maybe $15 more a week, you're still working 15 hours a week, 20 hours a week, you still have no benefits. Like, the wages is actually like the least minimal thing that's problematic in terms of how all of these other sector jobs are becoming exactly the same. In the back here, right there, in the blue.
I really, I'm excited about a lot of the work that y'all do, and I think that the models are really exciting. But for a sort of statewide perspective, I think one of the real challenges I have is knowing that the sort of like union, foundational, and sort of movement funding question in New York City is very different than it is in Buffalo or Rochester or Syracuse, right? So I'm really interested to know, like, one, sort of how, in terms of developing and initiating early critical mass, how staff intensive do you find that? And two, how do you find transitioning into like a sustainable, independently funded model? And is that happening, or is that even like an intentional thing to try to get to?
I think that we definitely want to get there. I think we actually struggle just as much around foundation money. I think Deb and Jonathan can talk about the foundations, but even on the labor front, people just don't have members' money. You have to be very careful what you do with members' money, correct? Like, if you are going to spend money on a campaign, it has to be the most effective and the most translucent, and it has to be directly responsible for winning something on behalf of workers. And I think everybody's struggling about how to become more sustainable. I think we want to try to figure out a model about how to have a long-term, not only New York City-wide, but statewide breadth in terms of organizing and doing this model. It's not easy. There's not a lot of money out there for low-wage work organizing. It's not like big foundations who make their money off the backs of workers are actually going to give money to organize those workers. And so it's how do you connect with unions and labor organizations to truly believe that this is the right model to participate in. And I think to your question about downstate versus upstate, it's like the same fight on issue work, right? It's like, how do I make this New York City campaign versus, the larger state campaign? And I think it's really about having a serious conversation with stakeholders from all across the state about how we're actually going to be able to pool our resources to make something a bit more effective. And it really is, like, people have to just say to themselves, well, this is what I want to do for the state. This is what I want to do in Buffalo and Syracuse. I don't want to have, like, siloed campaigns. I actually want to have something that's more collective, and I think that has to happen within the confines of the organizations that want to take that opportunity. And we're trying to do that in New York City. I would love to have the resources and the conversation to have that on a statewide level, but it has to be something that people are really willing to take that risk and take on.
Just real quick, and we got to wrap.
I was just going to say, I used to, when I was a union organizer, there was a lot of struggle around, like, we would get parachuted in to do some big scale campaign, we would spend a shitload of money, right? And either, like, you got traction or you didn't, and then you were out, right? So, the one thing I would say is at least if we're really building community labor partnerships involving multiple actors and building permanent organization on the ground that takes root even if we don't win a collective bargaining agreement, right? Then, like, we're building organization that's there to fight. And so I feel like that's a difference between, like, the models that we're trying to experiment with here and sort of what some, like, union organizing has looked like in the past. We're conscious that we're really lucky to be in New York City. Like, it's a different landscape politically, right, all of that kind of stuff. I think we've got to work statewide and nationally to build in places of strength and then link, right? So, like, we can go after some of the same targets across the country. It's like we can go after Wells Fargo because they are, funding private prisons for immigrants. We go after them because of mortgage foreclosure stuff, right? So, and we can do that nationally. So it doesn't have to be that we're capable of scaling up as big in every single place if we're smart about connecting the dots across the landscape.
Just one last thing on the scalability and, like, people doing this. We started our first organizing project, or my first organizing project, in the worker organizing in supermarkets. I started off with 2 organizers, which we were able to get one of the unions to help fund, and it built an entire campaign around supermarkets with, essentially funding for 2 organizers, and organized about 1,000 workers into that union last year, now in our 3rd year. So, I don't think it has to be terribly staff intensive, and got to be ingenuitive in figuring out how to get, some folks funded, and you got to have good people. but you can really drive an entire campaign at an industry in wherever city you're living with not a ton of staff now. And you can figure it out. So, and if folks are interested, they should actually let any of us know, because there's a lot of pointers and things we could give you that we didn't know from the very beginning, which we know now. All right. Thanks, everybody.